We're going to try and model this tri-square today. Hopefully by the end of it you'll be able to wonder a number of things. We're not going to model it with components, however, we're just going to model it with bodies. So if I switch to a new document, I get my work area. Everything in Fusion 360, in solid modeling anyway, starts off with a sketch. So I can click this Create Sketch button, and it's going to ask me to select a plane. For this, we're going to choose the front plane. It's going to twist that front plane to make it face me. We're going to start out by drawing a rectangle, a 2-point rectangle in this case. So we can start by hitting the shortcut for that, which is R. You see my cursor changes to a rectangle. Start that at the origin. Define the other corner by clicking again. The first thing you draw in all of your kind of projects or design should always start at the origin in some way. It should be tied to the origin, and that's generally best practice. We need to give this thing some sizes, so I'm going to hit D and see my cursor change to a dimension tool. I'm going to click on a line to define the line at the length of it. Move my mouse, click again, and I'm going to type in 30. I'm going to do the same for the vertical line, one of the vertical lines, and I'm going to call this 125. The default units that I'm using are millimeters. You don't need to type in your units if the measurement you want to define is already in your default unit, so I just need to type 125. I press enter, and then I can, if I'm happy with this, I can press finish sketch. The finish sketch button only appears when you are currently editing a sketch. So if you're confused about why you can't edit something or can't change something, it's probably because you're not editing the sketch. Press finish sketch. Let's see if we can look at this in more of a 3D view. So we can come over to the view cube over here and press home. Now you can see we're kind of in a 3D view. If you're on a laptop, you can use the trackpad and pinch to zoom in and out. If you're on a mouse, you can just use the scroll wheel. We need to make this 3D. The part we are currently making is the stock here, the handle. So I'll switch back. To make this 3D, the tool we use is called the extrude tool. Extrude, which is shortcut for which is E. It can also be found in the Create menu here. You also might have it in your shortcuts up here. Most of the tools that you use, a dialog box will come up. And this is like selecting the options, filling in the boxes when you're checking something out online. You have to go to fill in your billing address, your delivery address. Some of these things are optional, some of the things are essential. A profile is what you want to be extruded, what you want to make 3D. So the blue kind of outline indicates that we are currently on this option. So if I click on my profile, now it says 1 selected. For the moment, for beginners, you don't need to worry about this, or direction, or extent. You just want to put in the distance. You can drag out the distance, but the problem with that is it will snap to your grid settings. So if you have grid snapping on, it will snap to your nearest grid setting. In this case, the amount we want to extrude by is 17 millimeters. So I'm going to type in 17, and then I'm going to press OK. Now, I was a little bit naughty because I gave you the wrong dimension for the original rectangle we drew. You can see that in our timeline, this is this area down here, your timeline contains icons referring to or corresponding to each step that you took in order. So this is the icon for a sketch. You can see it corresponds, if I click on it, it highlights what that corresponds to. Okay, that little rectangle we drew. If I click on this rectangle, this extrude icon is here. You see it matches the same icon as the extrude. It highlights this body we've got. If I want to change you might be tempted to, if you wanted to change the size of this, you might be tempted to extrude again. You might be tempted to extrude this way and make it a little bit bigger. Okay, and you could do that, but it's incredibly bad practice. It's really bad. You should never do that. The reason being is if I click OK, I now have 3 steps in my timeline rather than 2. So if I'm trying to find something in my timeline, and you keep on doing that, you'll have millions of things in your timeline rather than just a few. So rather than doing this, rather than doing another mistake to correct an original mistake, I'm just going to delete that by clicking on it and press delete. And then and it reverts back to how it was before, rather than doing that, we're going to fix our original data. I'm going to right click if you're on a mouse. If you're on a trackpad on Mac, you'd be option clicking or 2-fingered clicking to bring up the options menu. And then we're going to go up to where it says edit sketch. Click on edit sketch, and there it brings us back to where we entered our original dimensions. These dimensions can be moved, they can also be changed. So for example, the one I gave you, which was 30, should actually be 38. So if I double click this, I can now enter 38. It's the correct dimension. I'll press enter. A rectangle changes. When I press finish sketch, the shape will update. Do you notice down my rectangle, my cuboid is a different shape? The next part we're going to draw, if I switch back to our finished version, the next part we're going to draw is this little brass plate on the front. Okay. So if I go back to our model, how do we do that? It's going to lie, our brass plate is going to be on this face here. And because that brass plate is exactly the same shape as the stock, our existing cuboid, we don't actually need to do an existing sketch, like a new sketch. We can use the existing face to extrude. So all I need to do is press extrude, so the shortcut for which is E. It's asking me for a profile. Now the profile I want to extrude is this shape here. The distance I want to extrude is, I don't need to change anything here or here or here. The distance I want to extrude is 1 millimeters, so 1. Here's where it gets a little bit different. I don't want to join. If I join those two bodies together, it'll just make one big blob. What I want is I want it to show that there's a difference between those objects. So rather than join, I want to select new body. If I zoom in, you'll be able to see the difference. Actually, now there is a little sort of separation between those bodies. If I click OK, you can see that there's 2 different cuboids there, which is great. So far you should have one sketch. Please highlight that to show what it corresponds to. You should have an extrude, and you should have one more extrude, which is the tiny little brass plate on the front. Our next thing we're going to need to draw is the blade of the tri-square. You might be tempted to draw this rectangle, this big rectangle here, and then extrude it downwards a little bit. But the problem, if you look at go back to our model, the problem with doing that is that if I press create sketch, well, which face do I choose to draw this on? If I draw it on this face, the blade will be on that face. If I choose this face, it will also be on that face, but actually it lies somewhere in the middle between those two. So we've got a bit of a problem. And in this case, instead of drawing the wide sort of rectangle, we're actually going to draw on the back here, and we're actually going to draw this tiny little rectangle here and extrude it this way away from us. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to switch back to our existing model. We're going to go create sketch. It's asking us to choose a face. Now, it's very important that you always choose the right face carefully to draw on. Each sketch is tied to a 2D face, and if you choose the wrong sketch, you won't be able to draw the shape or in the orientation that you want to. The face that we're going to choose is the face around the back here. So the way I'm orbiting like this is, if you're on a trackpad, you need to hold down Shift and just drag 2 fingers across the trackpad. If you're on a mouse and a keyboard, hold down the Shift key, hold down the middle mouse button, and then drag to rotate. The face we want to choose is this back face, so not the side with the brass plate, but the back face here. I select that, it's going to make it face us. I'm going to zoom in a bit. And the first thing we're going to draw is a construction line. We want to draw a very small rectangle in the middle here, and to help us locate it in the middle of this shape, we're going to draw a construction line. A construction line starts with a regular line, the shortcut for which is L. If I hit L, you'll see my cursor changes to the preview of a line. You can also find the line tool in the sketch menu down here, or under the create menu. And if I zoom in, the X that comes up is telling me that it's coincident with this edge here. But if I go to the middle, I'll see a triangle appear. Here we go. The triangle represents the midpoint of that line, and it will tie, if I click on the midpoint, it will tie that line, that start of that line, to the midpoint of the upper rectangle. If I zoom in at the bottom, we can do the same thing. I'm going to look for the midpoint. There's that triangle. I'm going to click to finish my line. Now, to turn it into a construction line, we need to deactivate the line tool by hitting escape. We need to select the line we just drew, and then there's one of 2 ways of turning it into a construction line. Either we can come over to our sketch palette and click on construction, or we can use the shortcut, which is smart, which is X, and you can see it's changed to a dotted line. If I zoom in, we can now start drawing the rectangle for our for the blade of our tri-square. I'm assuming you know by now what the shortcut is for the rectangle. It should be, I'm hearing you say it in your heads, it should be R. And I want the first corner to be to the left of the construction line and inside our shape. And I want the second corner to be to the right hand side of the construction line and come above the shape. And I'm just going to make it slightly wonky just to demonstrate something in the next step. So I'm going to deactivate our line tool, our rectangle tool, sorry. And then if I zoom in, we can quite clearly see that it's uneven. There's less space here and more space here. And we always want it to be symmetrical about this construction line. So what we can do is we can apply constraint. The constraint we're going to apply is called symmetry. And these ones here, these are your drawing tools here when you're in the sketch menu or sketch environment, and then these tools here in red are your sketch constraints. And constraints are like relationships between things. You can say this thing is going to be the same as this. This thing is going to be on the same level as this. This thing's going to be parallel to this. The one we want to do is we want to apply symmetry. And the way the symmetry constraint works is you select the first object to be symmetrical, which is going to be this line. Then it says select the second thing to be symmetrical, which is going to be this line. And the final thing to be selected is it says select a symmetry line. We've already got our symmetry line, it's here. Now watch what happens. Now our line is, our rectangle is symmetrical, and if we deactivate the symmetry constraint by hitting escape, and then we try and drag this rectangle, look what happens. They change together because they are symmetrical. The last thing to do now is we're going to apply some dimensions. So oops, I don't know what I've done there. I've hit D to activate the dimension tool. We want to set the length of this. So I'm going to select the vertical line. I'm going to drop my dimension. I'm going to type in 50. Okay, and if we look at our tri-square, the blade sticks out a little bit, but not as much as we have it in our model. So what I'm going to need to do now is dimension between two lines, between two sketch elements. I want to set the distance between this line and this line, and the way you do that is you click on them. I'm going to select this line here. I'm going to select this line here, and then I'm going to move between them, and it says 29.9, so drop the dimension, and this dimension is actually just going to be 3 millimeters, and now it's in the right place. The only thing we need to do now is give it a thickness, so it's going to be this line here, and drop this, and the thickness is going to be 1, just a measly 1 millimeters, and there we go. Again, once you've got your dimensions, you can kind of move them around to a better place. So I'm going to move that one there. I'm going to move that one up a little bit. I'm going to move that one in a bit. Okay. So I'm going to press Finish Sketch. And we're going to extrude these two areas. So E for extrude. We're going to rotate our view a little bit so we can see 3D. I'm going to zoom in. And because this cuboid bisects the rectangle we just drew, it recognizes them as two different sketch entities. So we're going to want to select two areas here. When it says profile, I'm going to select this one, but I'm also going to select this one. So it should say 2 selected if you've done it correctly. And if you look at if we go back to our tri-square model, it goes through our wooden stock and out the other side. So, it's taken us out of extrude, so let's press E again. Let's do that step again. Zoom in, we're going to select this area, we're going to select this area, and it's going in the wrong direction because we want to go towards the brass plate. So I'm going to drag this way. You can see it's giving me a negative dimension. Okay, it's giving me a negative dimension. So the number I type in is going to have to be minus 150. And there we go. We don't want it. Can you see how down here under the operation is telling us that it wants to cut? I could use that, but actually what we're going to do is we're going to do new body. Okay, like that. And then when I'm happy with that, I am going to press OK. And there we go. That's us so far. The problem that we've got now is that if you zoom in, can you see how something doesn't look quite right here? What should be happening is there should be a hole for the blade, and instead the blade is kind of occupying the same physical space as the stock. And if we go to our browser up here, we've got a folder containing our sketches that we can expand, and there's 2 sketches, and we've also got a folder containing bodies, and there is 3 bodies. If I highlight the one for the blade, this one here, and this eye will toggle the visibility of this body on and off. So if I make it invisible, you can see there isn't actually a hole for the blade. But to make one, we can do a really simple operation, which is called modify combine. So I say modify combine because it's in the modify menu. It's actually just called combine. So if we go to modify, and then we press combine, a little dialog box will appear. Now, what we're going to be doing is using the shape of the blade to cut into the stock or the handle. So the target body is the one that's going to be getting cut. So the one that's going to be getting cut is the handle. The tool bodies is the one that's going to be doing the cutting. And we want to use the blade to be doing the cutting. So the blade is our tool body. If you muck this up at any point, you can just unselect those and then start again. So again, target body is going to be the handle. Excuse me. The tool body is going to be the blade. We don't want to join them. That would be a mistake. What we want to do is cut. But the final thing you need to make sure is what this will do is it will delete our blade. So what we want to make sure is checked is we want to keep our tools. And then if we press OK, it looks slightly different. So if you zoom in, see those lines aren't interfering in this area. And actually if we select if we select the blade and toggle the visibility off, there is now actually a hole for our blade to exist. But there isn't a hole in our brass plate, so if you notice there's no hole up here. So we'll turn the visibility of our blade back on, and we're just going to do exactly the same step, except we're going to do it to the blade, the brass plate instead. So modify, combine. The target body is going to be this little brass plate here. The tool body is going to be the blade. We want to cut, and we're going to keep the tools. And we're going to press OK. And now if you notice, if I turn the blade off now, there's a hole in both of them. If I sort of orbit around, you can see there's a hole all the way through. And that's great, because if I change the dimensions of any of my things, of any of my bodies or my sketches, it'll update based on the cut will update based on those new geometries. So what's next is we need to create some of the information for the 3 bolts or 3 pins that go through everything here. Fortunately, that should be quite easy, because we should have a nice surface here to do our sketch on. So I'm going to press Create Sketch. It's asking me for a plane to draw my sketch on. I'm going to select this plane here, or this face here. It's going to make it face me. And for the second time, we are actually going to draw another construction line. So I'm going to press L to activate the line tool. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to pick up on the midpoint, which is there. I'm going to scroll down, navigate, pan down. I'm going to pick up on the midpoint there with the triangle coming up. I'm going to deactivate the line tool by hitting Escape. I'm going to select the line we just drew, and I'm going to select construction, or press X to turn it into a construction line. Now I need 3 circles. To draw a circle, you can probably guess that we're going to be going to the sketch menu. So create, circle, center diameter circle, shortcut for which is C. And you always want to be using the shortcut rather than the actual scrolling through the menus when you can, because it will save you a lot of time and you become a lot more efficient with your time. So I'm going to need 3 circles. One of these circles is going to be on this line. 2 of them are not going to be on this line. So let's do the 2 that aren't on the line. So I'm going to click to define the center of the circle, move, click to define the edge of the circle, click to define the center of the circle, click to define the edge, and this one I want to make sure is actually on the center line. So click and then click. You might be able to see that our circles aren't particularly equal in size, and I could activate the dimension tool with D and start dimensioning them. But rather than, as I know they're going to be the same size and they're always going to stay the same size, we can just dimension one of them and then give it some constraints. Well, let's do it the other way around. Let's do the constraints first and then dimension them, because it'll be more fun that way. I press escape to deactivate the dimension tool if you had it activated already. And this time we're going to use the equals constraint. Equals just sets two sketch objects to be equal in length or in diameter. So for example, I can click on this circle first and then click on this circle, and you can see they now match. I can do it again by doing the original circle and then this circle, and all our circles match. I can tell the equal constraint has been applied because the equal constraint logo has come up here. Okay, so a little equals sign, and an equals sign. Now, if I press escape to deactivate the equals constraint, and I try and make this bigger or smaller, you can see they move together. They start changing size together. So I'm going to hit D for dimension. I already had that one selected, so I'm just going to hit escape. So D, oh, it's already selected. That's okay. Let's just use that then. Drop the dimension. So 8, we're going to set this to a dimension of 8. They will change with each other. I need to set the distance between here and here. So I'm going to say the distance between this line, we're going to click, and the distance between this line should also be 8. The distance between here and here should also be 8. The distance between here and here, I'll do that again. There's a dimension in the way. Why is that coming up? There we go. Let's zoom in so you can see that a bit better. So D for dimension. Oh, D for dimension. Click on this. Click on this. Move in between. And let's set that to 8 as well. Or was it 8? I think it should be 12 actually. It should be 12. So set that to 12. And then the distance between here and here should be 22. We've got one more dimension to add. Let's find out what has gone wrong. So you can see when things are fully defined, they will turn black. And sketch elements are fully defined, they'll turn black. So if I try and drag this, if I click and drag this and try and move it, it won't move because it's fully defined. This one, however, is not blue. So let's find out why it's not blue. So if we try and drag it, we can see that it won't drag left and right, but it will drag up and down. So what isn't defined is we haven't got this 12 dimensions for this circle. So I'm going to hit D. I'm going to select between this line, this center of the circle, and this circle. Let's try that again. It's gone wrong. D. By the way, if anything's not responding the way we thought it would or the way it did last time, all you need to do is press escape, deactivate, press escape a couple of times, deactivate the tool you're currently in, and then reactivate the tool. So that's what I just did there. So I'm going to click on this circle, I'm going to click on this line, I'm going to move the dimension in between, and let's set that to, this is something quite clever. If I want this dimension to always equal this dimension, rather than enter this again, I can just click on this dimension. Watch what happens. So it says D28. So if I hit enter, it now applies the dimension of 12. And that's helpful because if I then say, actually I want this to be 13, look what happens to this one. They'll move together because this one is getting its information from this one, and that's really helpful. I could have done the same here actually. So let's do that for this one as well. So this one, so D, this one to here. Rather than enter 8, I can just click on this dimension. And now that's changed as well. So if I want to then change this one here, and I want to change it to 7, they'll change together. So let's change that back to 8. When that's done, we're going to press Finish Sketch. Let's rotate our view a little bit to see that a little bit better. And we're going to need to extrude these. So the shortcut by now you should know is E. It's asking us for some profiles to extrude. These three things, they're always going to be the same. They're always going to be extruded together. So rather than doing 3 different extrudes, we're going to select 3 together. 1, 2, 3. We are going to extrude downwards like that. We don't want to cut, however. We do want to do new body, but rather than going rather than entering a distance, so we could enter a distance of 17, which is this width from this line to this line, the thickness of our handle. But rather than, I'm going to show you something slightly different now under extent. So rather than choosing distance, we can say, actually I want to extrude this, not a set distance, I want to extrude it to an object. And it says select what object you would like to extrude to. And now, if I select this face here, it's going to extrude to that face. So however wide or thick that stock is, it's always going to extrude that distance. And the last thing to remember is we don't want to cut. You could use cut. It would involve another step. I think it's easier to, in this case, we're going to use new body. And we're going to press OK. Now, some of you might be thinking we've got the same problems we did before. We've got some faces or some bodies that are intersecting with one another. So again, if I see this one here, here are our 3 pins we just extruded in our bodies folder. Make sure you've got that visible. So that one, and that one. If we turn these off, you can see that actually there's no hole for them. So we're going to need to do the same thing that we did for the stock with the blade for the pins as well. So we're going to need to do a modify and combine. So it's very similar to the previous step. So modify, combine. Target body is the stock, so the handle. Tool bodies, see how it says there's a plural option. We can select multiple tool bodies, so we can select 1, 2, and 3, and we want to cut. It remembers what I did before. We want to cut and we want to keep tools. I'm going to press OK, and now if you turn one of these off, there's actually a hole for it. There's one more thing we've got to do, is we need to do the same thing but for the blade this time, because remember the pins go through the blade. So modify, combine. Target body is the blade. Tool body, tool bodies are the pins. Keep tools, press OK, and you are done. There is your tri-square. It looks like our tri-square is a little bit, I don't know, it looks like the blade isn't long enough. I'm just going to check on my other model. I'm going to check the length of this line. 190, it should be 190, so I've deceived you a little bit, and the length of our blade should be 190. It shouldn't be 150 as it is, so we need to change that. Right. Those of you who were concentrating will remember that to create our blade, we created a sketch for this tiny little rectangle up here, and then we extruded it this way. So the thing we are looking to change is we are looking to change a feature rather than a sketch. We're looking for one of these in the timeline. So let's have a look. Let's zoom in a little bit. We know it's not going to be this one because this is a sketch. We know it's not going to be this one because that's this extrude for our handle. If we highlight this one and click on it, It's not that because that's the brass plate. There's the sketch there's the sketch we want, so we know it's going to be after this, because this is the sketch where we did this center line, it's the sketch where we did this rectangle, where we applied symmetry, and then the next step we did after this was extruding the blade. So if we look at the next kind of icon in our timeline, there's our extrude for our blade. So all we need to do is option click or right click to bring up this little menu, go to edit feature, and then rather than entering 150 or minus 150, we're going to go minus 190. I'm going to hit OK. And then our tri-square looks more like a tri-square and a little less stubby. There we go. So that's it. So if you want to have a look at what you did, you can go back in time. You can hit this sort of, I don't know, right rewind button to go to the beginning of time. Don't worry, nothing has been deleted. What you can do is you can press play to play through what you created. Or you can step through individually. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so forth. There we go. Well done.